Hey everybody, welcome back to the Author Podcast with Dr. Brian Hartman. Now, episode 1 set the record as my highest viewed episode. Of course, it was actually my first episode, but let's see if we can go higher with episode 2. Got some good stuff for you, so are you ready? I hope so, because it is opening rant time. All right, opening rant. This one's actually close to my heart. Here we go. This is going to be audiobooks versus regular books. Which one is reading? So there's a common theme in social media groups on this topic, and tons of people say that listening to an audiobook is reading. So there's a little bit of semantic issues here, but let me clear it up once and for all. No, listening to an audiobook is not reading. It's listening. So read what I just said again. Listening to an audiobook is not reading. Reading is done with the eyes. Listening is done with the ears. Now, I'm a doctor. I kind of get this sensory perception thing. But wait, you say, that's ableist. What about blind people? Are you saying they can't read? So that's a tricky subject. And I would say that interpreting Braille is reading. When you break it down, reading is taking symbols and interpreting them as words. So you're using an eye substitute, which is your finger, to interpret symbols into letters and words. So I would say that yes, Braille, using your fingers, is reading. However, listening to an audiobook is not reading. Now, before you unleash your wrath upon me, hear me out. I think the heart of the matter is the difference between a noun and a verb. Some people want the virtue of standing up for someone, even though hardly anyone is actually trying to insult anybody or take anything away from people when they say that listening to an audiobook is not reading. But there's people dying on that hill anyway. So I've seen people look at this and say, well, no, look, I went to an audiobook reading. See, it's reading. Like, no, a reading in that instance is a noun. The reading we're talking about is a verb. Meaning, if you go to a reading, someone is reading a book to someone else. I went to a live reading. In this case, live is an adjective. Reading is a noun. The central idea in this discussion is about action. What are you actually doing? Verbs and adverbs. Quickly reading, obsessively reading. You can't use the definition of a noun to reclassify it as an action. So take a look at these two books. There is a difference in how they will be consumed. But is it significant? So here, I'm going to pick it up and use my eyes. Here, someone has read that book into an audio file, and now I listen through my headphones. But does any of it really matter? I think it's a case of a distinction without a difference. At the root level, is there significant difference? Absolutely not. So both reading and listening to a book means consuming the content. It's allowing the brain to imagine what's happening in the scene. It's appreciating literature. We're expanding our minds. So as an analogy, just picture this for me. If I'm standing still on a moving sidewalk, am I walking? You could be walking right next to me at the same speed, same direction. We're both upright. We're both seeing the same things. We're both going in the same direction and end up at the same place. But you are performing the action and I am being acted upon. So is that the same? Am I walking or are you walking? So this is the same with reading a book versus listening to an audiobook. Ultimately, I think people just love to fight and argue, just as I said in the last rant, right? And what better topic than something that is essentially the same thing, with no moral superiority possible, other than to stand up for victims who like to listen to someone perform an audiobook narration instead of read. If this doesn't make sense, grab your hearing aid and start this over again. All right, moving on to current events. So this is early in the podcast series, right? I don't want to jump into politics yet. So let's talk about the California wildfires. But wait, isn't that a lot of politics? There's a lot of politics in that, right? Unfortunately, yes. So from a statistics standpoint, there's tens of thousands of acres burned, really per fire. Thousands of structures lost, dozens of deaths. That's most likely going to be much higher when they get in through these structures. I'm hearing numbers of possibly over $125 billion in damages. Like, I can't even fathom that. Now, looking at the maps of the area, what strikes me most is the housing density. I'm seeing homes that are stacked right upon each other. It's like monopoly houses on a full board. There's very few gaps. There's very few natural fire breaks. But the problem is real estate's so expensive there. It doesn't really make sense to have a yard, right? Fill it with house, build another house right next to it if you're a developer, if you're collecting property taxes. So we went to San Francisco a few years ago. Tons of small lots by the ocean, insane property values, mostly for the land. And looking at that, I think that's the problem. And it seems like a horrific union of things happened out there. You got bad water policy. It's not being political, it's just true. Incredibly dense housing, massive windstorms, incredibly dry air in the desert-like environment, a refusal to clear leaves or deadfall from forests, antiquated electrical grid. So many factors played a role, but who could have predicted this? Well, the insurance companies sure did. So for years, they've been raising rates due to perceived risk of fire. And the state was unhappy about this because, hey, they were gouging their customers, right? So they put a cap on the rate hikes, just like they did with the medical insurance. So the insurance company said, well, we can't make money taking on this risk, writing a policy for that. So they stopped writing policies. And some even canceled existing policies at the end of the term. And this all happened fairly recently. In the last year or two, it got bad. So my guess is a lot of these homes don't even have fire insurance. They could have went back to the state exchange, but I'll bet they just didn't yet. And so the feds are going to be expected to make up the difference on this $125 billion event so far. Now, if the feds are going to make everyone whole, I think it's valid for us, I'm in Indiana, that we can have an input into how our tax dollars are going to be spent. And so it's definitely worth identifying factors that led to this, not to place blame per se, but to learn and pivot for the future. So you can't keep the same policies and expect different results next time, right? Definition of insanity. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that. Did you know over 300 fire hydrants were stolen from LA in 2024? Yeah, they're literally stealing fire hydrants. People ram cars into them to dislodge and then sell for scrap. I mean, 20, 30 bucks, but they'll still do it. So in 2014, California had a bond sale to raise billions for new reservoirs. That was 10 years ago. None have even started construction. They have some plans approved, but nothing has been built. So when they rebuild these communities, what's going to be different? If you try to build a giant tower of cards and it falls, what do? Do you build it exactly the same way again? Or do you consider how to proceed so that you don't have another disaster? You got to change something so you don't end up with the same results last time. So will they approve the building permits for the same housing density? If not, or if there's these mandated fire breaks that get put in, who's forced to sell? Who gets to keep their land? And what do you do with the extra land? Does it go to the city, the state, feds? What do they pay? How do you value that? So Newsom just signed an executive order limiting the sale of property in infected zip codes. Essentially, it puts a ban on unsolicited, undervalued offers for 3 months. Which, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? You don't want somebody to come in desperation and have to sell, but what stops someone from selling what they want for what they want? Like, if you have this land and you want to wash your hands of California real estate and move, now you can't do it. You're not allowed to sell to whatever the state considers a low value. What if you wanted to cash out and just go? Literally a fire sale. Like, that's the name. So I hate government involvement in private transactions almost every instance. Let people sell what they own to whomever wants to buy it at an agreed upon price. Why is that so difficult? But as a general concept, let's continue to pray for rain, calm wind, no arsonists, and perseverance for the firefighters, victims, and those who step up to help. These images have been heartbreaking. I'm hoping 2025 calms down a bit and minds its own business for a while because, man, it has been a heck of a start. So let's jump to the namesake of this podcast and jump to the writing section. Okay, keeping with the opening rant theme, let's talk about books, specifically my books. Now, these are not my new ones, but they're great little props to have for the earlier part. So I released my first Christian fiction novel, Sacrificial Touch, on Christmas. It just kind of worked out that way. It wasn't planned. So I don't have a physical copy yet, but I'll show you the cover here on Amazon. So I wanted to highlight the altruism and sacrifice of medical workers in this book. I was kind of getting frustrated with how the system was working and all the barriers, and I just had to get that on paper. So what better way to magnify that than to do it as much as possible? My main character is an ER doctor, Cameron Turner, who's frustrated with the system, with electronic health records, administration, billing, and so many barriers that they put up for us to actually take care of patients at the bedside. So early in the story, a drug-addicted patient assaults him, stabs him in the neck, codes in a dramatic fashion, and had a near-death experience. Literally goes to heaven and meets God and has a decision. So he's given a choice. Do you stay up in heaven? Or do you return to earth with the ability to heal anyone of anything? Of course he chooses that in a heartbeat, right? What doctor wouldn't? It's literally what we train our entire lives to do. But God adds that the gift comes with a catch. It's not just a simple thing that he can go and wave a wand and heal everybody of everything. Every time he uses it, he loses a month of his life expectancy. Whoa, right? So it's not unlimited. It physically harms him every time he does this, and he leaves the earth sooner, he leaves his family sooner. So he has to pick and choose the recipients. And I use this to show the emotion behind when he uses it, how it affects the people that receive it, and then the problems when he holds it back. Like, again, it's not unlimited. He has to make decisions. So ultimately, society is not ready for Miracle Worker. So Dr. Turner and his family decide how to make the most impact before he dies. And it builds up to a tear-jerking emotional roller coaster of a climax. And you need to have your Kleenex ready because you're going to get the tears going. And I really do hope it moves you to consider your time here on Earth to be nicer to the people in the healthcare industry. And as a general concept in your life, what are you doing with it? What are you living for? So again, check it out on Amazon, $13.99 for the paperback, $4.99 for Kindle. But it's also in Kindle Unlimited, like the rest of my books. So if you pay the monthly fee to Amazon, you can read as much as you want. All right, so this takes us to the end of the second episode of the Author Podcast. I'm really enjoying producing these episodes, and frankly, I'm learning a lot along the way. I'm probably going to rotate the desk for episode 3. I don't really like the corner behind me, but it is a very tight space here. So please like and subscribe, then come back next Sunday to see what's new. Got a great idea for an on-location segment. I just need to get the weather to cooperate and make sure I have my film crew together. I've also got a friend who does functional medicine and is working with ketamine and really helping people with depression and PTSD. So I'm going to try to get an interview with him set up. Now, thanks for watching, and until next time, go enjoy this beautiful gift of life.